Well, last night, unfortunately, spelled the end of the Detroit Lions regular season, and there won't be a playoff appearance in 2022 for the Putty Cats after the 20-16 victory over the Green Bay Packers on the road at Lambeau Field in a back and forth game that for a while looked like it wasn't going to go in the Lions' favor. Unfortunately, the reason that the Lions won't be in the playoffs isn't because of their performance on Sunday night, but rather their performance across the season. In particular, on Sunday night, it was the performance of the Seattle Seahawks that ultimately spelled the end of the Detroit Lions season, with many going back to last season, came back to the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford in 2021, where many Detroit Lions fans became fans of what was known as the quote unquote Detroit Rams. Once again, coming back to that last night as the Seattle Seahawks faced off against Los Angeles in Seattle with the 12th man on hand and that loud, raucous crowd that they always have at Lumen Field in Seattle. And that was also a very interesting game that was a little bit of a back and forth. It could have gone either way. A lot of luck was involved to even get it to overtime, where it ultimately ended in a 16-19 score in favor of the Seattle Seahawks. And many would argue that the refereeing, the officiating in that particular ball game last evening, was awful. I would also say it's that. Now, typically, I'm not one to be in the camp of blaming the refs for a team's loss. Ultimately, you've got to outplay the situation that you're in. And in that case, the Los Angeles Rams didn't do that. It's evident by the way that they played. It's evident by the fact that Seattle, despite stepping on their own shoelaces and tripping back and forth, left and right all throughout the game, were able to stick with the Rams and ultimately bested them at the end. Baker Mayfield had a chance to hit a receiver wide open, basically a guaranteed touchdown, underthrew the ball, and it was picked off by none other than former Lion Quandre Diggs. So once again, Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn come back to haunt the Detroit Lions, this time becoming the reason they're not in the playoffs. Quandre Diggs, former Lion on the Seattle Seahawks, spelling the end of the Lions season. But as much as the officiating was garbage in that game and questionable in Green Bay, ultimately this comes down to a couple weeks ago. The Lions had a chance to secure their destiny and make none of this matter last night. If they beat Carolina, they go in, they take care of business on the road. Maybe, they don't get so down on themselves as it's seen by body language and by effort on the field on Christmas Eve. We're telling a different story right now, a miraculous story of a team that came back from being 1-6 to not just making the playoffs as a wild card, but potentially being a contender to go all the way in a pretty weak overall NFC. The Lions would most likely have been going up against the Minnesota Vikings in the first round, a team that won the NFC North division despite being a hot pile of garbage in the Minnesota cold. That could have been an opportunity for these Lions. That being said, you look at this season's performance versus last season versus recent seasons, and you've seen vast improvements in this team. A team that's young, a team that's got a lot of youth that played at a veteran level, 9.5 sacks on the season for Aiden Hutchinson, including 2 last night against Aaron Rodgers. One that I thought should have also resulted in a fumble, but ultimately the Zebras didn't agree with that, and they make the final decision. I just sit at home and yell, annoy my neighbors. Nobody knocked on my door, though, so that was at least nice. We'll see about what happens going forward, but that's besides the fact. Last night, a great performance by the Detroit Lions. Jared Goff, again, had a solid game. Was he great? No. Was he good enough? Absolutely. Was he pretty good? Absolutely. I'd say he was too. 23 for 34 passing last night. No interceptions, no touchdowns, averaging about 6 yards per throw with passer rating of 85.9, besting a future Hall of Famer in Aaron Rodgers, who had similar numbers on the other side with a little bit less output, throwing for 205 yards and a passer rating of 83.1. But the Lions were able to take care of business on the road last night, and over the last 10, 11 games of the season had been excellent. Again, starting the season 1-6 overall, looking like this team was going nowhere quickly and may not even surpass their 3-13-1 record from a year ago. And instead, end the season with a winning record, 9-8 overall, having bested the Chicago Bears 2-0 in the season series. Of course, the Chicago Bears, the worst team in the league, now have secured the number 1 overall pick after what was just a fantastic finish to the Lovie Smith era in Houston, where all they had to do was lose that game or at least tie that game, and they'd have the number 1 overall pick. And instead, they go for 2, they score, they beat the Colts. And now not only do they not have the number 1 overall pick, they're once again doing a coaching search this summer. This fall, winter, spring, summer, for next fall. Now I'm all caught up. Lions across this season, though, vast improvements over past years. If you look at just their comparisons from this year to last year, in terms of yards, points forward, they scored 453 points in 2022 versus last year, same number of games, 18 games both years, 325 points. They gave up 467 points across the season in 2021. This year, down 40 points while also increasing their output of over 130 points that they scored, the Lions scored this year versus last year. They're improved in the skill positions, bringing in DJ Chark, a guy that can be a target down the field, but also in short range situations. Amon-Ra St. Brown, their slot receiver, the best receiver in that core at this time, took big strides. And near the end of the season, having Jameson Williams, JMO, coming back into the fold off an injury and not necessarily having the most stellar output we were hoping to see from a guy that's a first round pick, but also wasn't getting a lot of the targets. Also didn't have the full chemistry in tune with his team and with that offense, having missed the majority of the regular season due to his injury that he of course suffered in college. So the question now becomes, where do the Lions go from here? 9-8 season, just missing the playoffs, all of this momentum. The same old Lions are gone. Something is different here. This culture is different. The way these guys played in that situation last night, I think says all you need to know about where the Detroit Lions are, where the Detroit Lions are going, and the potential that they have. It's easy when a team across the country, 3,000 miles away, loses and seals your fate to just give in, give up, play at half speed, 60%, 50%, 40%, and do what you did in Carolina and finish with an 8-9 overall record. Still a vast improvement. Hey, I said this team had 7 wins in them at best before the season. That wasn't a confident 7 wins. That was I'm thinking 6, but I'll say 7 and try to be an optimist. This team outdid that. Starting 1-6 overall, there's no reason this team should have been 9-8 to finish the season, besting the Packers twice, winning on the road with a chance to maybe make the playoffs in Green Bay until it was flexed to 8-25. And the Seahawks, of course, took care of their own business in Seattle and spelled the end. But what we have now in Detroit with this Lions team is something we haven't seen in a very long time. Momentum and the ability to build off of what happened in 2022, come back in 2023 and potentially be the favorite to win the NFC North and potentially be a contender in the NFC come playoff time. Think about what we have. Now we've got young guys that are talented on both sides of the ball. DeAndre Swift took big strides in the second half of the season. Jared Goff, maybe not the quarterback of the future, but a serviceable quarterback, a beyond serviceable quarterback that we have right now. He's not necessarily making the greatest throws. His arm talent has been questionable from week to week. There were some passes last night that were very much underthrown or different parts of his progressions that maybe he didn't see in game action. And you can question whether or not he should have been able to make those plays at those times. But you look at the last 11 games of the season. You look particularly at the last 9 games of the season. 0 turnovers for Jared Goff. No interceptions in the last 9 games. And out of the last 11 games, he's only thrown 1. Only threw 1 interception the second half of the season. You look at his career stats. Best year he's had throwing the ball since a 2-year period at his peak in Los Angeles, including a year he was a Pro Bowler and a year he made the Super Bowl. That's a huge improvement, especially from what we saw in the first 7 games from Jared Goff. They are wickedly talented in the skill position, particularly in skill position of wide receiver with Amon-Ra St. Brown, potentially Chark coming back, and Jameson Williams potentially having a full healthy season ahead of him next year and being a core part of this Lions offensive scheme. Now that's all coming together and questioning whether or not the brilliance that was Ben Johnson this season on the offensive side of the ball, calling the plays for the Lions, their offensive coordinator, is he going to come back or be a guy that gets an opportunity with another team, as we are today on what's known as Black Monday in the NFL, with coaches expected to be fired left and right? What the Lions do have is an opportunity to, instead of focusing on continuing the rebuild, to kick that rebuild into the next level, to take that rebuild and start drafting to contend, signing free agents to contend, and go all in next year. Lions have 2 first-round picks. Those are now locked in. Those are official. The Lions, having missed the playoffs with the results of last night, are going to have their pick, their Detroit Lions pick, at 18 in this upcoming draft. So a little bit beyond the middle of the first round. But they also have the Los Angeles Rams pick. Silver lining of them losing to the Seattle Seahawks is, well, we don't make the playoffs, but we have their pick be a little bit higher in that draft order at number 6. So you have the opportunity to address maybe filling a gap on the offensive line at the guard position, maybe adding some more depth to that defensive line, or drafting a linebacker to go alongside Malcolm Rodriguez in that core, which needs fast improvement, or a defensive back as well that you can put into that core and shore up the secondary. 2 second-round picks, theirs and Minnesota's, that were acquired in the TJ Hawkinson trade. A 3rd-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and 2 6th-round picks, and nothing but reason to be confident in the drafting ability of Brad Holmes. These aren't your same old Lions. For the first time in a long time, we have a reason to be hopeful. We have direction. We have a blueprint there. We have a team that in the locker room and on the field believes in what they're doing week in and week out, plays for each other, plays for the coaches. And in the game of football, that is so big. That is bigger than offense, defense, and special teams. That's bigger than any monster play that changes the course of the game. That's bigger than some game happening 3,000 miles away that you have no control over. In the last 11 games of the season, the Lions took care of their business, and now they have an offseason where they need to continue that. And if they do, and if they keep on this course, 2022 may not have been what we wanted it to be, but 2023 could be the best thing we've seen since the days of Barry Sanders.